Welcome to the debate. Today we are looking at a constitutional and logistical collision course. The United States Postal Service's unprecedented 2026 proposed rule to establish a federal gatekeeping system for mail-in ballots, fundamentally altering how Americans vote ahead of the midterms.
Mm-hmm.
If you enjoy content like this, please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications so you'll always know when new content is released.
Yeah, please do.
As a quick update, we monitor the Martin Stevens versus OpenAI matter. It is still not a lawsuit. Martin Stevens suspended his voluntary quiet period after OpenAI filed its confidential S-1 registration statement on June 8, 2026, without first engaging with him. He views this as extreme disrespect and won't re-enter a quiet period without a formal agreement. No settlement discussions are confirmed. The dead man's switch has not been activated, and he remains safe physically and legally.
Right.
All right, so returning to our primary focus for today, we're unpacking a really profound and incredibly timely dispute centered around the USPS ballot mail rulemaking.
Extremely timely, yeah.
Right, which was initiated by President Trump's Executive Order 14399. And essentially, we are exploring this deep tension between the federal government's push for national logistical uniformity and security and the state's arguments that this rule is, well, an unconstitutional commandeering of state resources and potentially a massive mechanism for voter suppression.
It's a huge collision of priorities, for sure.
Exactly. So I'll just lay my cards on the table early here. I see this USPS rule as an unconstitutional overreach. I think it threatens mass disenfranchisement by basically interfering with state election autonomy.
See, I come at it from a fairly different way. I mean, we're dealing with a federal agency that is tasked with national logistics.
Right.
To my mind, a system that vast simply must have the authority to establish uniform security and data standards. It's the only way to protect the integrity of the federal mail system and, by extension, our elections.
I hear that. But I think to really understand why this is so alarming, we have to start with the fundamental architecture of American democracy. The Constitution's Elections Clause is very clear.
Well, clear is always subjective in election law, but go on.
Fair. But it explicitly assigns the regulation of federal elections to the states, subject only to alteration by Congress. The states have the primary authority to provide a complete code for how elections are run, but this USPS proposed rule totally upends that constitutional balance.
I don't know if I'd say upends.
It does, by demanding that states submit these detailed voter lists up to 30 days in advance of an election, and by requiring states to adopt highly specific Intelligent Mail Barcode, or IMB, envelope designs, the Postal Service is functionally setting up an unlawful federal checkpoint.
A checkpoint.
Yes. They are essentially telling sovereign states, comply with our newly invented, federally mandated surveillance program, or we simply will not deliver your citizens' ballots. I mean, that is a staggering threat.
I hear the constitutional framing. I really do. But I think we need to look at the physical, operational reality of the United States Postal Service.
Okay.
The USPS is a highly complex, mechanized federal infrastructure system. It's not a passive state utility that just magically makes pieces of paper appear at a destination.
I'm not saying it's magic, but it is a service.
Right, but when you look at the systemic realities that were outlined in the USPS 2024 Post-Election Analysis Report, you see a remarkably stark logistical picture. I mean, we have nearly 8,000 disparate election jurisdictions in this country.
Sure, it's decentralized.
Highly decentralized. And they have conflicting time frames, entirely different deadlines, and localized practices that just completely ignore the practical realities of national mail logistics.
I get that managing 8,000 jurisdictions is tough, but that's the system we have.
But that system is buckling under the weight of its own fragmentation. Executive Order 14399 and the resulting USPS proposed rules rely directly on Title 39 of the U.S. Code, specifically Sections 401 and 404.
Which grant general operational powers, yes?
Exactly. They grant the USPS the power to adopt the rules necessary to execute its functions. It is entirely necessary to modernize this system. We have to utilize basic tracking technology, like barcodes, and we need to ensure that only eligible citizens receive ballots through the mail stream.
Wait, but why is it the USPS's job to determine eligibility?
Because doing this maintains public confidence in the mail, and it prevents unlawful use of federal infrastructure. You cannot run a high-speed, automated national assembly line if 8,000 different local managers keep tossing, irregular, untrackable gears into the machinery?
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective using a real-world equivalent.
Okay.
Imagine a federal highway administrator suddenly demanding to see every single driver's birth certificate and a detailed destination itinerary before allowing them to merge onto an interstate highway.
That's a bit extreme.
Is it? The USPS is proposing the creation of a state-specific mail-in and absentee participation list. How does generating a roster of eligible voters qualify as a core postal function rather than election administration?
Well,
The USPS has delivered absentee ballots for over a century without ever needing to act as a bouncer at the door of the franchise. Their job is the collection, transportation, and delivery of the mail, period.
that's a compelling argument. But have you considered that a highway administrator absolutely does require standardized license plates, vehicle registrations, and uniform toll transponders?
For the vehicle, sure.
Right. To ensure the highway functions safely and efficiently, the highway doesn't ask who you voted for, but it does demand to know that your vehicle belongs on the road. The USPS isn't regulating the election itself. They are regulating the mail.
But they are doing it in a way that dictates election policy. And, Judge Indira Talwani actually just ruled on this exact tension on June 25th.
In the California case?
Yes, in California v. Trump. She struck right at the heart of the executive order, declaring it ultra-virus.
Which is under appeal, of course.
Sure, but in plain English, that means she ruled the president acted way beyond the scope of his legal power, specifically noting that the executive branch has no constitutional power over elections. Congress never delegated the authority to control mail-in voting to the Postal Service.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that logic. Let me tell you why. The Constitution grants Congress exclusive power to establish post offices and post roads, right?
Right.
And through Title 39, Congress explicitly gave the USPS the authority to determine what is mailable and how it should be prepared. If a state chooses to utilize this massive federal postal infrastructure to conduct its election, rather than having its voters show up in person at a local precinct, the not state must adhere to the operational standards of that federal infrastructure.
But they're not just operational standards.
You cannot demand the unlimited use of a federal system while outright refusing to comply with its security and processing protocols.
Let's talk about those security protocols then. Because you were describing a sweeping federal surveillance program, not just a simple, mail delivery standard.
Surveillance is a very loaded word.
It's the accurate word, and that brings us directly into conflict with the Privacy Act. Under 5 U.S.C. Section 552A, federal agencies are explicitly prohibited from maintaining records describing how any individual exercises rights guaranteed by the First Amendment, unless it's explicitly authorized by statute.
But no one is tracking how someone votes. The USPS has no idea who you voted for. They are just tracking that a piece of mail is moving through the system.
But the USPS is proposing linking every unique barcode to a specific voter's name and address. They are creating a massive, centralized database of who is voting by mail in a federal election. Congress has never authorized the Postal Service to conduct preventative, nationwide surveillance on voters under the guise of setting an envelope standard.
See, that's an interesting framing, but it ignores the very real exceptions built into the Privacy Act for authorized law enforcement activities.
Law enforcement?
Yes. The executive order specifically points to statutes prohibiting the unlawful use of the mail in connection with elections, including traditional mail fraud statutes. Title 18, Section 3061 of the U.S. Code gives postal inspectors explicit law enforcement authority regarding crimes involving the use of the mails.
But what is the crime they're preventing?
By utilizing intelligent mail barcode identifiers and cross-referencing federal voter lists, the USPS is establishing a reliable, auditable mechanism.
But auditing what exactly? There's no mass fraud to audit.
Auditing the physical flow of the mail to detect anomalies. Law enforcement officials can compare the total number of mailed ballots originating from a jurisdiction to the total number of received ballots returning to that jurisdiction.
Okay, but
Let me finish this thought. If 10,000 ballots go out, but 15,000 identical envelopes come back through the mail stream, that's a federal mail crime. In an era where election integrity is constantly under a microscope, Using basic, automated data to verify that the mail system isn't being abused is a perfectly legitimate federal postal function.
I am not convinced by that line of reasoning at all because it lacks empirical justification. We are talking about redesigning a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure to catch what amounts to a statistical ghost.
A statistical ghost?
Yes. If we are justifying this massive data collection mandate on fraud prevention, we need to look at the actual numbers. A comprehensive Brookings Institute study looking at 4 recent general elections found a mail voting fraud rate of just 0.000043%.
Well, past performance.
That is literally about 4 cases out of every 10 million mail votes. It's virtually non-existent.
Statistics from past elections don't negate the vulnerability of a system that is increasingly reliant on mass mailings. The volume of mail-in voting has skyrocketed, which fundamentally changes the risk profile.
Okay, but if this is purely about securing the mail stream and fraud prevention, then we have to address a glaring, honestly almost absurd contradiction written directly into the proposed rule.
Which is?
If these intelligent mail barcodes and federal participation lists are so absolutely vital to the integrity of the election, why does the proposed rule completely exempt primary elections?
Well, that's a...
And why does it exempt UOCOVA ballots, the ballots sent to military and overseas voters? If untracked ballots are an existential threat to the postal system's integrity, why are millions of them perfectly fine for a primary in May, but suddenly a catastrophic crisis for the general election in November?
The exemptions actually demonstrate that the USPS is trying to act carefully within its statutory limits. They're recognizing the complexities of the broader system. USCOVA ballots are governed by a highly specific, pre-existing federal law, the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act.
Right.
An existing statute.
Okay, and the primaries, why skip those?
As for primary elections, they are often administered under vastly different timelines and rules. In many states, they are run entirely by political parties rather than state apparatuses, and the turnout is significantly lower and more staggered.
It's still mail moving through the system.
Yes, but the focus of this new rule is the massive centralized surge of the federal general election in November. The fact that the rule is tailored specifically to the heaviest burden on the postal system doesn't invalidate the underlying need to standardize the millions upon millions of envelopes flooding the sorting facilities all at once.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it very differently.
Naturally.
That tailoring is exactly what makes the rule arbitrary and capricious. You cannot say a security measure is a fundamental requirement for the physical mail system to function and then just wave it off for millions of pieces of identical mail just because it's a different day of the year or a different type of voter.
It's about volume.
But let's actually move away from the legal theory for a moment and look at the implementation on the ground, because this is where the policy truly breaks down in real time.
Okay, let's talk about implementation. Because standardizing envelope designs to include the official election mail logo and intelligent mail barcodes are universally recognized modern best practices.
In theory, sure.
The USPS operates a massive, highly automated network. These optical scanners process tens of thousands of pieces of mail an hour. When you have 8,000 local jurisdictions designing their own envelopes, some using odd sizes, some putting barcodes in the wrong place, some using paper stock that is too thick, and some not using barcodes at all, it causes physical jams.
I know it causes friction, but
It causes massive delays. It forces machines to kick the mail out, which requires manual sorting by human hands. The proposed rule is simply demanding that states get up to modern logistical standards. If you want high-speed, guaranteed delivery of millions of ballots, you have to give the sorting machines data they can read.
I don't disagree that standardization is a worthy goal. In a vacuum, a perfectly uniform system sounds great for the machines, but we do not live in a vacuum. We are talking about forcing a fundamental redesign of state election logistics just weeks before a federal election.
They've had time.
No, they haven't. The real-world disruption here is severe and incredibly expensive. States rely on the USPS's own guidance, which is published well in advance of an election, so local clerks know what to buy.
Right.
In February 2026, the USPS published its Kit 600 Official Election Mail Guide. That guide recommended, but explicitly did not mandate these barcode changes.
But they knew the technology was shifting. Everyone knew the USPS wanted to move to barcodes.
Yes, but they operated on the official guidance provided at the time. You don't spend taxpayer money on a rumor. Based on that February guidance, states and counties spent millions of taxpayer dollars pre-purchasing their envelopes. Massachusetts has already spent approximately $3 million on envelopes.
Wow.
Cook County, Illinois spent $300,000. Now the USPS is threatening to treat those envelopes as non-compliant and refuse them entirely.
It is unfortunate when administrative upgrades require financial adjustments. I won't deny that. But states have known for years that the USPS was moving toward intelligent mail barcodes. The Postal Service cannot permanently hamstring its national operations simply because some local clerks prefer to do things the way they did them in 1995.
It is not about clinging to 1995. It is about the physical impossibility of overhauling an entire supply chain and database infrastructure in a matter of weeks. In election law, there is a very well-established precedent called the Purcell principle.
Right. The non-interference principle?
Exactly. Essentially, the Supreme Court has repeatedly warned against federal courts or agencies intervening and altering election rules right on the eve of an election because it causes immense chaos for both voters and administrators. The USPS is ignoring that entirely. Furthermore, Judge Emmett Sullivan recently ruled that this sudden shift actually violates a 2021 USPS settlement with the NAACP.
Wait, how so? What does the settlement say?
In that 2021 settlement, the USPS legally agreed to prioritize the timely delivery of election mail. Judge Sullivan pointed out that you cannot claim to prioritize delivery while simultaneously imposing an 11th-hour rule that will explicitly force your own postal workers to throw millions of locally approved ballots into a rejection pile. Imposing this mandate right now risks catastrophic, system-wide disenfranchisement.
The risk of disenfranchisement goes both ways, though.
How does a barcode prevent disenfranchisement?
Because if the postal system gets bogged down in October because of non-standardized, untrackable mail flooding the system from thousands of different local offices, ballots will arrive late and go uncounted anyway. A jammed sorting machine disenfranchises people just as effectively as a rejected envelope.
I mean, that's highly hypothetical compared to outright refusing the mail.
It's not hypothetical, it happens. The USPS is attempting to establish a baseline of operational certainty. The requirement for a state-specific list isn't just about gatekeeping, it's about capacity planning.
Capacity planning?
Yes. If the USPS knows exactly how many ballots are entering the system on a given day and exactly where they are going, they can allocate the transportation networks, the trucks, and the personnel required to meet that specific demand. When states just dump undocumented, unbarcoded volume into the mail stream, it creates the very chaos they claim to be avoiding.
But the rule's mechanism for achieving that certainty is inherently flawed, and it clashes directly with state law. The rule requires states to finalize these voter lists 30 days out.
Which is standard.
In states like California or Washington, which have universal mail voting where everyone is on the list early, sure, maybe they can manage that. But consider states like Vermont, or states with same-day registration, where a voter can legally request an absentee ballot up to 1 day before the election.
Right.
Under this federal USPS rule, a Vermont voter who follows their state law perfectly might have their ballot refused by the postal clerk because their name wasn't enrolled on the federal list 30 days prior. The federal executive branch is functionally rewriting state election deadlines through a postal regulation.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the technical mechanisms the USPS built into the rule to handle that exact situation?
What mechanisms?
The proposed rule explicitly allows states to make supplemental submissions. They can modify their lists until the last day ballots can be mailed out under state law. The USPS has built flexibility into the federal ballot mail portal specifically to accommodate those rolling state-level deadlines.
A portal update on the day before the election?
Yes.
The logistical reality of that is a complete fantasy. Picture a local county clerk pushing a real-time data update for a newly registered voter to a federal portal on a Monday afternoon. You expect that data to be processed, approved, and filtered all the way down to the handheld scanner on the local post office floor by Tuesday morning?
It's a digital system, yes.
That data lag is inevitable, and when that lag happens, eligible, legal voters will have their ballots blocked at the postal counter simply because the federal database didn't refresh fast enough.
What is truly a fantasy is expecting a unified national infrastructure to perfectly serve 8,000 fragmented election jurisdictions without establishing foundational data and logistical standards.
But it would cost.
Yes, a transition to a modernized, secure, and data-driven mail ballot system will have friction. There will be moments where a local clerk has to adapt to a portal, but the alternative is to continue allowing thousands of localized, non-standard systems to dictate the operations of a massive federal agency. A modernized election requires a modernized postal interface, and that requires tracking, standardization, and verification.
Well, to summarize my position, while election security and logistical efficiency are obviously vital goals, they absolutely cannot be achieved through an 11th-hour administrative fiat. This proposed rule attempts to override state constitutional authority, it violates established privacy and postal statutes, and it willfully ignores the practical realities and financial constraints of local election infrastructure.
Right.
We just cannot claim to protect democracy by actively risking the disenfranchisement of millions of voters over barcode requirements and federal watch lists.
And to surprise mine, we must recognize that the USPS operates in the physical, mechanical world of logistics, not just the theoretical world of constitutional law. A unified national postal system simply cannot adequately or securely serve a fractured patchwork of 8,000 election jurisdictions without foundational standards.
Even if it disrupts the vote.
If states are going to rely on federal infrastructure to deliver democracy, they must be willing to meet the security and data requirements necessary to keep that infrastructure functioning, efficient, and trustworthy.
I think where we do find some convergence is in acknowledging that there is a genuine, undeniable tension here. The mismatch between highly localized election laws and the mechanical realities of a national postal capability is a real problem.
Absolutely. Better coordination is desperately needed.
Right. Where we fundamentally diverge is on whether the federal executive branch can unilaterally impose that coordination by holding the mail hostage weeks before an election. This conflict really illuminates the delicate balance between managing federal infrastructure and respecting state sovereignty.
It really does.
It leaves us to ponder exactly what we started with today. When the precision of federal logistics collides with the messy, localized reality of American democracy, who ultimately has the right to decide how the machinery works?
Well said.
If you found this episode valuable, please like, subscribe, share, follow, and turn on notifications. It helps us continue bringing you content like this and ensures you never miss future releases.